I rise to oppose this legislation, Mr. Speaker. I oppose it as Minister of Local Government. I oppose it, Mr. Speaker, as the leader of the ACT Party. And I oppose it, Mr. Speaker, as a New Zealander. Mr. Speaker, this bill represents a radical departure in New Zealand to the management of natural resources and to local government in New Zealand. I don't think members appreciate how big the departure is. Indeed, the government is on record as saying that this is a one-off and unique, but we heard the Minister today in introducing the bill saying it will be the model, the benchmark, and we heard from the Labour Party saying that is the case too. Mr. Speaker, the way we manage natural resources in New Zealand is through private property owners and the Department of Conservation managing the resources that they hold in freehold or as part of the Crown Estate. And overlaying that, Mr. Speaker, we have regional councils, such in this case the Waikato Regional Council, that are required under the law, under the Resource Management Act, to take care and provide the framework within which water, air, land and other resources will be managed to protect, if you like, the common interests that we have in these resources. Mr. Speaker, the regional councils have enormous power because for a farmer, for example, they can allow or deny the ability to use a water right. They can set rules within which how you can farm your land and indeed, Mr. Speaker, how much fertiliser you can have on your land and how many stock units you can have. So the power in a regional council over a people's way of life and over their lifestyle is enormous, Mr. Speaker. That's why we have a process of electing locally in our regions representatives to represent us, because if they make decisions, Mr. Speaker, that we disagree with, we can vote them out. And so, if you like, you might be a farmer that's getting regulated in a way that you consider to be unjust. Well, your response to that is the democratic one of actually agitating politically and to get that person or that council dumped and to have your say. And it does mean that regional councils have to have regard to the interests of the people in their community and in their catchment. That's why when this government was confronted with the issue of ECANs, it had to think long and hard about its responsibilities to the people of Canterbury to deny them the opportunity of an election this time round while we sought to sort out the problems of the dysfunction. I remember hearing at length from the Labour Party opposite about the loss of democracy. Well, here's a question. What about the loss of democracy inherent in this bill that we're debating today? Because that democracy and the loss of that democracy is huge. Let me explain, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is introduce to New Zealand at a level of local government across an entire catchment and everyone in it for the first time ever co-governance. We have not had that model before, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Tohanare calls out that it's a great day. Well, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, it's a very, very sad day for the people of Waikato, and it's a very, very sad day for the people of New Zealand, because let me explain. What we'll have now is a Waikato Valley Authority made up of people that are unelected, Mr. Speaker, from the community. They will be representing the tribes of the region and they'll have Crown appointments. Now, I know Tohanare likes this because his brother-in-law, Tukaroy Rangi Morgan, negotiated it. And actually, the Tainui people are going to be in the box seat for the use of the river and of the catchment, and so why wouldn't they be appreciative of this bill? But the bill, Mr. Speaker, is wrong because the Waikato Valley Authority, unelected, appointed by the tribes and matched by the Crown, they, Mr. Speaker, set the vision and strategy for the river and for the catchment, and the Waikato Regional Council have nothing else to do but to follow it. So picture this, Mr. Speaker, it's going to go like this. In the future, say, a dairy farmer will apply for a water right consent or to roll over the existing consent, and the Waikato Regional Council will deny them that consent, costing them their livelihood and their way of life, and they will do so, Mr. Speaker, not because of the Waikato Regional Council's decision, but the decision of the Waikato Valley Authority, because it doesn't fit with their vision and strategy, Mr. Speaker. And I have to say that that's what is a sad day, and it might be all right for Tauhanare and his mates who are in the driver's seats, but it's a bad day. It's a bad day. It's a bad day for the people of Waikato, Mr. Speaker. Well, what does Mr. Bennett say? He says, let us decide. Well, that's actually a very interesting comment. I would be happy for that, but the Waikato Regional Council didn't get a choice, because this is Parliament, Mr. Bennett, and the Waikato Regional Council could have done this if it had chose to, but Parliament and the government came along, negotiated without their involvement, and now through Parliament is forcing it upon them. Because, Mr. Speaker... Order. Well, now we've got a backbench National MP not agreeing with the sacking of ECANS, which I find very interesting. My point about ECANS, Mr. Davis, was this. I covered it off, and if that member, instead of sitting in the back chirping away because I can't sit in my seat, but if that MP just sat there and listened for a change, rather than trying to be a smart dick in this Parliament, we might actually get some sense, Mr. Speaker. Because no, I got no problems with anger. All I'm saying is, if you let me make my speech, you understand what the issue is. I want to go on with this, Mr. Speaker, and I ask you, Mr. Speaker, this one. This is what is in the legislation. And I actually respect Maori values and spiritual views. Well, people can think what they like. People can choose to believe what they like. But it's very difficult when you put it into law. And understand this, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry.
It says this.
Sorry, order. Point of order. Yes, Keith Locke.
The noise is a bit too loud, and as I understand it, a member can't move from his seat, and Mr. Quinn's seat's at the back, to be close to the Speaker, to interject on him the way Mr. Quinn is.
A member, Speaker's ruling is quite clear that a member cannot move to take advantage of interjection, but in the House there's a general kind of acceptance that people move for other reasons. But the member is correct that the noise level has got a bit high. I've cautioned members. I just asked the member to continue, and he has. 2 minutes.
Speaker, well, one of the difficulties is that people do shout down those with a dissenting view in this House, Mr. Speaker. But let me read you this. It's in our legislation now. The Waikato River, this is what the Crown is legislating for. The Waikato River is our tupuna, ancestor, which has a mana, spiritual authority and power, and in turn represents the mana and Maori, the life force of Waikato-Tainui. The Waikato River is a single, indivisible being. That is to say, Mr. Speaker, it's a living thing. It's an ancestor, according to this legislation, that flows from Tahiki, Huki to Te Puia o Waikato, the mouth, the whole river, and includes its water, its banks, its beds, all the minerals, the streams, the waterways, the tributaries, the lakes, the aquatic fisheries, vegetation, floodplains, wetlands, islands, springs, water column, airspace and substratum, as well as its metaphysical being. The whole lot, Mr. Speaker, the whole catchment is an indivisible living thing that is the ancestor of a people. Now, the only people that can interpret whether that ancestor is upset or hurt or being annoyed or being disrupted or being affected